Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Student Tracker webinar to help you understand your high school reports. My name is Michelle Grolick. I'm here with my colleague, Rob McTighe. We're going to walk through the report packets for you today. Quickly review the agenda, just a general description of the Student Tracker reports, the benefits of the reports, some FAQs, and then we're going to dig into the actual reports themselves. A quick comment, this webinar is oriented towards those who have a general understanding of the clearinghouse, how we get our post-secondary data, have used Student Tracker maybe once or twice, seen the report, so we're expecting that you have at least a little bit of an understanding of how the reports work. So, but just as a reminder, the reports that are included in the Student Tracker for high school service are, there's a set of aggregate reports. One that we call a basic packet, sometimes referred to as the aggregate packet, a demographics packet, academics, and then there's a student detail report. For purposes of this webinar, we're only focusing on the aggregate. The student detail report will be done in a separate webinar. That's a very lengthy report, so we don't want to shortchange. We want to make sure we have enough time to cover that fully. And I just mentioned the demographic aggregate report. As a reminder, there are 5 different demographic data elements that you can provide in your Student Tracker diploma file submission: gender, race, ethnicity, economic disadvantage, disability, English language learner. And if you provide these to us, we can return Student Tracker reports stratified by these data elements. And then here are the academic data elements. Again, these are focused on classes that the student would have taken. So math, English reading, a dual enrollment indicator, meaning did your students take any college classes during their high school years? You let us know, yes or no. And then a number of math semesters completed.
So some of the benefits of Student Tracker for high school reports, it's going to help you understand how your high school graduates are performing when it comes to their college going rates and whether they get a degree or not. It's going to provide aggregate level report outcomes and student level enrollment credential details. It's going to stratify outcomes by institutional and student characteristics to provide a unique perspective. And we're going to display 8 years worth of high school graduation classes to give to you in a longitudinal perspective of how your students are doing. And then we're also going to provide a report of a list of the most common colleges that your students are attending. So some frequently asked questions we're going to cover right off the bat. One common one we get is, why don't the numbers on my aggregate reports match the student count on my detail report? So most of this has to do with the FERPA regulations. So because these are aggregate reports, we can count students in these reports because we're not personally identifying their information. But in the student detail report that we'll go over in a separate tutorial then, that does identify the students, so we will not show those. So when you're trying to match those numbers, they're just not going to line up exactly.
The next question is, what is the effective date? I think this is probably the second most frequent question. So the Clearinghouse has a research center. So the effective date is set by our research center, and they set it 3 times per year. We set one in the fall, in the spring, and in the summer. And this date is noted in the report file name that we send back to you, and it's also within the Student Tracker application. But the date is set to ensure that your Student Tracker reports provide the most comprehensive enrollment and degree data that's provided by the colleges and universities for a given period, and that all of the secondary education institutions that use Student Tracker are matched against the exact same set of post-secondary data. So I'm just going to pause for a second because that was a lot. And then reports generated in between effective dates are still going to be processed against the most recent effective date. No new data is reported.
So that rolls us into the next one. Why don't any of our students have enrollment records at a particular college? So again, we do rely on the post-secondary data that's submitted to us. So with regards to the effective date, we do have institutions that will send in their fall or spring or summer enrollment at their own schedule. So there are times where they've missed that effective date that we set, so we don't have their enrollment at the time that this effective date is going into effect for your report. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, that's the description. It's just, I'm sure it could be frustrating, but again, schools, they do a very good job adhering to their schedule, but every once in a while, something happens. It could be anything from staff turnover to a change in SIS. So those are just issues beyond our control.
Yeah, and I think we can touch on, when we set that effective date, we make sure we have about 98% of all the post-secondary schools data in-house before we do set that.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Rob. The next one, are those college classes that a student took during high school included in StudentTracker reports? The basic answer is no. StudentTracker was set up to report the college enrollment after the student has left college. So we're not going to report any of those classes. We know a lot of students take community college classes during high school. I'm going to get into a little more of that when we talk about the first fall. So that's all I'm going to say on that one right now. And, the clearinghouse, how do we define persistence and retention? So these are terms that our research center uses frequently in their national benchmark reports, et cetera. This is for the student who's going to college, and typically it's used in reference to the student who starts freshman year and whether or not he or she returns the second year. Those are very key and big indicators in a student's college going rate. So retention is used when a student enrolls at a school and returns to that same institution the second year. Persistence is when the student returns in the second year to any institution. So similar but slightly different. Again, just a matter of, is the student returning to the same institution he or she started or going to a different institution in that second year? All right, now I'm going to bring up the actual aggregate report packet. Let me get it here. So this is a packet, or a sample of the aggregate report that we mocked up specifically for this. So this might look familiar to you. It's just the cover page, but you'll see this one was run down here on 11/20 of 17, and you can see that it has 45 pages in the packet. So I'm just going to say, everyone, no need to get worried. It's 45 pages, but it's I think it's very logically organized. So Rob and I are going to go through and explain this. The reports are set up in different outcomes, and we're going to go through these. The first outcome we're looking at is, are the students from your high school class enrolled in college in that fall immediately after high school? We define fall for purposes of the student tracker as August the 15th through October 31st. Does that student have any college enrollment that crosses through those dates? And this is what I was hinting at before when we asked about what about the student who takes classes during high school. It's possible that a student may have an enrollment begin date that is before high school graduation, but the term end date falls within the August 15th, 31st. So I want to clarify. That's why sometimes people get a little bit confused. But again, first fall is just trying to use those dates of August 15th through October 31st, any enrollment that encompasses that time period. So this is showing you that outcome, but you can see there's 8 academic years across the bottom. This is meant to show you all of the high school graduates that you've provided to us for these years and how they fare against each other over time. We're going to report to you the classes that you've provided. The most we'll send is 8. If you've provided 5 to us, you'll see 5 on this report. But it helps you just get a good comparison to see what's going on from class to class. And an example here is you see in 2014 we have a bit of an increase. It went up to 71%, then it went back down. This may be something you want to think about at your institution. Were there any changes made for the high school graduating class of 2014? Maybe it was something that started even their freshman year. We're not able to tell you, but we give it to you so that you could do some investigation on your side. So the next few reports, it's the exact same outcome, but what we're doing here is breaking out to show you if your students went to public institutions or private. Just gives you a good way to compare what your students are doing. And next, again, same outcome, but just a comparison 4-year to 2-year. And then lastly, showing whether your students are going in-state or out-of-state. So again, all 3 of these different stratifications could give you some good intel about what your classes are doing, where the students are going. The information would be on the detail report if the students are not blocked. But it just helps you understand so you can either counsel future students. A lot of different things you can do with this information. So we showed you charts and graphs with percentages. Every one of the outcomes has this table at the end that gives you the numbers behind the percentages. So you can see your classes and again, what makes up each of those percentages that we reported. Then we shift to students enrolled in college anytime in the first year after high school graduation. Perfect world, all your high school graduates enroll in the fall and they're following the typical college path. That's not reality. So what we're doing is showing you the percentage of students who went in the first year. Again, the same thing, the 8 years. This is the all institutions. Then it goes through the same stratifications, public, private, 4-year, 2-year, in-state, out-of-state, and the table. And I was looking at this before the webinar, and if you would look at your first fall and then compare these numbers, total enrolled, there is an increase. So you can do a little mathematics there, a little 8 basic subtraction, and see how many more students went to college in the first year just from the first fall. And the third one is students that enrolled in college anytime during the first 2 years. These were all outcomes that our research center thought were key outcomes that you would be interested in, and that's why they're included in this packet. And it follows the exact same sequence that I've already showed you. All institutions, public, private, 4-year, 2-year, in-state, out-of-state, and the table. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is you'll see at the top of this report, right up here on all the pages, it tells you the effective date so that you know what date we're matching your students against.
And Michelle, can you touch on why maybe there's more of a dip in the class of 2016 and 17 on this report? Let me just go up here.
Oh, good, thank you. So this is a report showing 2 years after high school graduation. So when we look at 2010, 11, 12, et cetera, they have some nice consistent rates, but then you'll see, like Rob said, down here they're dipping a little bit. And that's basically because 2 years have not yet passed for that academic class. So next year, when we run this report, you'll probably see the 2016 get a little higher, and then in 2 years, you'll see 17 get a little higher. So yeah, that was a good clarification, Rob, thanks.
All right, so moving on. So the next report, we're now on page 17 of the packet. This is the percent of students who enrolled in college the first year after high school and returned for a second year, so they're freshman to sophomore, and this is that persistence that Michelle mentioned at the beginning and defined for you. So again, this is showing all institutions, and again, with the packet, we're breaking it out. Then you go public to private in 2-year and 4-year. And then we do have a dip, if you notice here, in the class of 2013. For the out-of-state, it does drop to 71%. So when you go to the graph, I want to point out, go to the column for 2013, And if you go down to the in private first year and enrolled anywhere else the second year, you can see that the dip looks pretty drastic, but when you look at the numbers, we're talking about 78 students right here. And then when they returned for the second year, there was only 58 who returned. So if you take 74% of that 78, that's where that number's coming from. Just as a reference point when you're looking at this, that's how we're getting those numbers for you. And then the next one, we're now on page 22, is the percent of high school who completed a degree within 6 years. You'll notice you're only seeing the class of 2010 and the class of 2011. This is because we need a full 6 years to have completed to get this calculation. So once next year completes, then 2012 will appear on here. And you can see that for this institution, they're pretty consistent. 33% of their students did complete a degree within 6 years. And it does break it out in the next couple, like we said, public, private, and then 2-year, 4-year, and then again here, in-state, out-of-state, and your numbers at the end. So we do want to stress, we get this question a lot, is why is there only 2 classes here? You need the full 6 years to have completed to appear on this graph.
Okay, now you can see that now we're changing from the longitudinal graph to bar charts. This outcome now is for time to college graduation within 6 years. So again, we're only seeing the class of 2010 and 11, like Rob mentioned, because the 6 years have passed. But it is showing you for the class of 2010, right here, all what has happened with the students in that class. And each color, of course, corresponds. Here's the legend. So the burgundy shows that those you had 1% graduated in 2 years or less. The green is showing you graduated in 3 years, orange is graduated in 4 years, and the 5 is graduated in, blue is graduated in 5 years, sorry about that, and then the yellow is graduated in 6 years. So it helps you just get a different perspective on what your class of 2010 is doing. Here's 2011 comparison. Pretty much the same, a few different percentages, a little bit lower here, a little bit higher here. But again, the point of this, as Rob said, is once you get the 6 years have passed, you can really compare how your students are doing one graduating class to another.
And just another reference, this is that same 33% that you saw on the previous chart, just broken out farther for you to look at.
Oh, and again, here are the numbers that support those percentages.
All right, so this is an interesting bar graph. Don't be afraid of it. It's actually a pretty cool graph to look at. So if you look at the top, this is only your class of 2010. So please, for the next couple reports, look at the top. So we're talking about your class of 2010. So in the first year after high school, you can see that 68.9% of your students were new to college. And then we're going to persist them on throughout. So when you see the orange, those are those 68.9% students persisted on throughout the ages here. So the next year, 57% persisted, the next year 45, and it gets smaller. But if you look at the bottom at the purple color, you can start to see that students have now started graduating. So 5% in 2012 graduated, then that jumps up to 16%, 27, all the way up to 35%. So this is one of my favorites because, yes, it's colorful, but it gives you a great picture of your one specific class to see the trend and how they're persisting and completing throughout the years. And again, we're going to scroll down. You've got the number chart in the next one, so you can get the actual breakdown of who persisted, who graduated, who is no longer enrolled. And then page 31, if you look at the top, this is where I was mentioning, now we're looking at the class of 2011. So you'll see that bar chart starts to get smaller and smaller because we don't have the year 2017-18 and 18 and 19 completed yet. So you're not going to see those. So again, 70% of your students were new to college the first year and persisted on, 57%. Pretty standard, matching the 2010 class as well. And again, here's your numbers. And this is going to continue on through almost the end of your report packet. So again, class of 2012. And you'll notice the charts do get smaller because we don't have any other completed years to put in this chart. And we're going to go all the way to the class of 2016 for you. So we only have one completed year, so that's all you will see at this time. Now, next fall, there'll be another column there for you.
So now this is showing you the most common institutions of enrollment that your students attended in the fall. This is an aggregation, so it looks at all of the students in the classes that we've put in this report, and it determines what that first school was that they went to. And this gives you a breakdown, the top 25 by number of students. So the example we've been using here is from Louisiana. So you'll see that 1,557 students went to Louisiana State. And then it goes on down. The last one in the top 25 is Grambling. 11 of your students went there in the first fall. This is strictly for information, something you might find useful to counsel students who are getting ready to graduate, where they may want to go to school. You can let them know this is the top schools that your graduates went to. But it's also interesting to compare this then when you have the detail report, just to see then of those students who started, how many actually graduated then from those institutions, or did they go somewhere else. It's just some really good intelligence if you want to understand more about where they're going to school. And the last two pages here are, you could call it an appendix. It's really a report's definition. It tries to very succinctly explain what each of the reports are that Rob and I just explained. So again, it's trying to be short. Hopefully there's some more information written there that supports what Rob and I said, gives you some explanations, and hopefully that's, we're hoping that that's of value to you. I think sometimes people forget that this is back here, but it's a good resource to look at least start with, and then if you have any questions, you can follow up with us. So that's the end of the basic packet. I want to quickly show you the demographics packet. So in the reports that we send to you to your FTP, you get the aggregate, a demographics, and an academic. And as I said earlier, the demographics is produced based on those data elements that you provide to us. So in our example here, it does look a little bit different than the aggregate packet, but it's the same general format. We're showing you those 8 classes across here and showing you how they fared in their first fall, but this one is broken out by gender, male and female. Again, first fall. This one breaks it out by the race ethnicity. Okay, this one just went on to the second page showing you the numbers. Now this one says it's intentionally left blank. This is just to let you know that in this example, the school in question did not provide the economic disadvantage indicator for any of the students, so there's nothing to report. This one shows you the breakout by disability. And this is one that you define. We don't give any explanations of what you should use. It's basically determined by how you would define it at your school or at your school district. English language learner, and then it changes, and now we're going to the first year after high school. So it follows the same pattern that we had in the basic packet, those same outcomes, stratified by the demographic data elements. And the academic packet is pretty much the same way. It's just broken out by those 6 academic data elements that we showed you on that first slide. So, anything you wanted to add on this one, Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, we do have a lot of institutions that will get to the academic and demographic packet, and again, they want to know why it's blank, some are blank, or all of it's blank. So in your graduate file, if you didn't provide these optional data elements, these will be intentionally left blank. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't add this data in and rerun your reports. So if you do want to do that, just send us new graduate files. All the data is the same, but add in those optional fields, and we'll rerun these packets for you so that you'll have these bar graphs and data elements.
Okay, good clarification. Thank you. All right. So there was the packet that we went over. Oh, let me get the slideshow from current slide. Within the Student Tracker service, you're able to actually have a web ID and go into the application. One of the things we have here is submitting a test file. I think there's tutorials on all of these different options. But what we want to point out is over here is the reports definition. This is basically the exact same content that were the last 2 pages of your basic packet. We just pull them out separately because it's a good resource in case you might have misplaced something. We're just pointing out that they're here for you to be able to access.
So for more information, we do have a couple things here. Please visit our Academy site, clearinghouseacademy.org/secondary. There's a lot of tutorials coming up. There's some we've recently posted for you. So please visit the site. We also have the Student Tracker for High School Help function. So, when you go to our main site, studentclearinghouse.org, click on the High School tab, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see Student Tracker for High School Help. There's a lot of great resources out there for you. And then if you have questions, please feel free to email us at studenttracker@studentclearinghouse.org. And if you do need assistance uploading your graduate file or accessing your reports, please email stpadmin@studentclearinghouse.org.